Hey, beautiful souls. It's Catherine here from Sacred Heart Alchemy and Divinely Inspired Feminine Leaders. And we are here for Campfire Story number 4. So I hope you're ready. The funny thing about this story is as I was looking through all of the prompts, so today's prompt is if there's any one person, dead or alive, who you could have dinner with, who would that be and why? And each day I've read through the whole list of prompts to see what jumps out at me. And I was kind of surprised that I skipped over this one because the answer is so obvious to me, but I wasn't drawn to speaking to it in any of the previous 3 campfire stories. And now I perfectly understand because today is the feast day of Mary Magdalene. Oof, my heart just like kind of bursts right there in that moment. So it was just waiting for me to do this campfire story today because my first and really only answer is the one person who I would want to have dinner with and lunch and breakfast and an overnight camping adventure and a whole bunch of other things would be Mary Magdalene. And so what a beautiful day today, her feast day, when she was finally recognized as the divine light being, the mentor, teacher, divine Christed feminine leader, healer, oracle that she truly is, as opposed to the early stories of her being, a prostitute, a woman of the night, which is so far from the truth. She came from wealth and generations of women who were trained in the mystery schools. She was part of the Essene community. She was born fully awake, knowing the truth of who she was. And she knew that in the lifetime that she was alive, and she could prophesize that for thousands of years she would be held in contempt and called terrible names and have mistruths told about her. And she still chose to come into form and live this lifetime, this earthly existence with her beloved teacher, lover, counterpart, Yeshua. So I'm going to start with a story for my story. So, growing up Catholic, as I mentioned in my Facebook post today, we didn't hear much about Mary Magdalene except that she was the woman at the well who Jesus healed, and sent the 7 demons out of her. And, later in life, I recognized that he was actually opening her chakras. So anyway, there's a whole story about that. But so it was much later in my life that I really began to understand that she was not the whore or the prostitute that the church had put forward. And I have been, an avid student, reader, mentee of hers for many, many years now. And probably the most powerful, or the earliest powerful experience that I recall having with her was actually with Mary Magdalene and Yeshua. And it was in 2008. I was out in California at a group coach training, week-long training. And we were working that day with Tim Kelly, who was a purpose coach. And in his language, he talked about, oh Lord, now I'm going to forget the words he used. Your trusted sources. That's what it was. So who are you working with, basically, in the higher realms? And it could be, someone you knew on earth who has passed over, or angelic support or ascended masters or even your own higher self, your own higher consciousness. But part of our work that day was to go into meditation that he led and connect with our trusted sources to have them deliver to us some message about our mission and our purpose. So, okay, here goes, sitting down, doing this meditation. And, he's leading us into the meditation, and we, go down some walkway and into a garden and standing in the garden. And then he, sort of just instructed that you'll see your guide, your trusted source. And immediately in that moment, in the way I have never experienced before, I felt two forces of nature, two very powerful beings come up and stand behind me. And I just knew that it was Yeshua and Magdalene. These things, if you've ever had this experience, you don't know how you know. Typically, I'm not, clairvoyant in the way I would have seen necessarily them in my mind's eye. I just had an inner knowing, a gnosis, that this was Yeshua and Magdalene. And in the time of that meditation, they shared quite a bit with me, but specifically in regards to my mission or my purpose. They, what was that show? Mission Impossible. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, I'm not remembering his name right now, but, basically your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to, they may have said co-create. I only heard create heaven on earth. Okay. And in that I would not be the only one doing that there would be many light workers on the planet doing that work to create or co-create heaven on earth. But my specific contribution to the creation of heaven on earth was around healing the wound of the feminine, which made perfect sense to me. Because in my life up until that point, I had worked with girls in residential facilities for a short time. I had worked in the areas of rape crisis, domestic violence, sexual assault, child sexual assault, women's reproductive rights, women in poverty. So I had a lot of background in the area of advocacy, activism, healing, and empowerment of women and girls in particular. So while I was not shocked so much that this would be the work to heal the wound of the feminine, I remember thinking, create heaven on earth. I don't remember that being one of the choices in those high school, like take the test to find out what you're best suited for. I think I got like auto mechanic because I'm good with my hands, and I don't know, something else, like accountant or, I was like, I don't really remember that as being a choice, and I'm not really sure I know how to do that. And they assured me not to worry, that they would be guiding me, they would be guiding my steps, and they would be guiding my words as I deepened into this work. The other thing that became very clear to me as part of that conversation, or energy, I want to call it actually, as I remember how much I was vibrating through this whole experience now, energy exchange, was that it was also clear to me that this had to do with balancing the masculine and the feminine energies on the planet, right? Bringing, helping to anchor the divine feminine energies back to bring our world into balance. And again, that made sense to me because when I went through seminary, a primary aspect of my seminary program was around this working with the divine feminine. So, all the little crumbs, all the little pieces along the way, were starting to make sense. It didn't mean that I knew what the heck I was supposed to do with all of that going forward, but these were my trusted sources, right? Yeshua and Magdalene, the perfect representation, embodiment, both as individuals and together as the perfect balance of divine masculine and divine feminine energy. And, at that time in my life, for my whole life, I grew up with 6 brothers. So I had a lot of masculine energy, right? I wasn't a girly girl. I'd much rather be climbing a tree or playing in the brook or, catching tadpole, doing something boyish or playing sports, beating the boys. But I was very masculine in my energy, very much in my mind, very analytical, very figuring things out, very, smart in that way. I didn't even understand really what the feminine energy was. It took me years to begin to integrate that enough to actually recognize the difference of operating from my heart or my intuition rather than my head, to open up to my feeling self, my emotions, my sensations, rather than try to just stuff that down and think my way through things, and lots of other things. So that was in 2008. And there have been periods in time where I have felt like I am really in tune with that energy and sort of on fire with it, and then other times where I felt like I don't know. I'm like completely feeling like I'm out in left field here talking about things that I don't really understand. So I would love to have dinner with Mary Magdalene because her mission, as I understand it, as I've read and studied and listened to her and, journaled and had her come through at times, was primarily focused on healing and empowering an entire population of women at her time who were suppressed, who were victimized, who had violence perpetrated against them all the time, who were really held in very low self-esteem in the world that they were living in at the time. So, and as I read recently, a quote from her, a chapter of hers, that she literally extracted cellular imprints of severe trauma and abuse from the energy bodies, the emotional bodies, the physical bodies, and the multidimensional bodies of the women who she would heal as she embodied the fierce lioness of Sekhmet. So I love that here I am doing this work of helping women release. I'm not necessarily extracting sort of, I think, in the same way that she was describing, but certainly supporting and facilitating the release of heavy, dense cellular imprints of abuse and trauma with the women that I work with. So she also was, she was a student of the mystery schools, right? But she was very in tune with her emotions and her feelings. And she had to find a balance. And from my understanding, Mother Mary and her own mother, who was also trained in the mystery schools, were great mentors for her in being able to balance sort of her fierce advocate, activist, want to take the system down energy and finding a way to balance that, because that was not safe or possible in her world. And I really resonate with that, because particularly since having gone through seminary and taken vows as a spiritual peacemaker, I am searching for the right balance of my very natural, authentic social activist, advocate, one who speaks out, who, led marches and spoke at graduations and called out administrations and, did all the things. And, now that we're in this energy of having our reproductive rights and our rights to decide how to manage our own bodies and pregnancy, I marched for those rights over 50 years ago. And I had to actually go to another state as a teenager to have a termination of pregnancy that I couldn't bring to term. And, I had to change my identity and lie about, my name. And I was terrified that my parents would find out somehow, that it would get back to them. And that literally, my mom was sick in those days, that it would literally kill her to know that I had both been pregnant and then terminated a pregnancy. So to have those rights rolled back now, along with so many others that, we're seeing in this public arena, that in this, time that we're in, this work feels even more powerful and significant to me. So I would love to sit down with Mary Magdalene and understand how you gotta join me around the campfire, how she used the chamber of her Sacred Heart to balance those energies, to come to a place of being able to still be a creatrix, a healer, a teacher, an oracle, a shapeshifter, right? All of those things, and use the sacred alchemy of her heart to stay in a place of love. So fast forward, a number of years ago, I was working with another coach to sort of brand my business. And we did that over the course of 3 days in a shamanic journey. And during those 3 days, once again, Yeshua and Magdalene showed up to me in so many different beautiful ways with more of the same message. And that's where the name of my business, Sacred Heart Alchemy, actually was born. So I just feel like having a meal with her or having more time would be such an amazing experience, not just to experience her warmth and her love. And I think her sense of humor, I think she was a real woman in her day, right? When she walked the earth in this embodiment, but also to understand more of that, as I said, balancing of the masculine and the feminine, balancing her very fierce activist nature and her the way of the rose, right? Her living from her heart, and her being totally guided by source, which is actually, I don't know if you can see my shirt. It's all about being sourced, because that is my prayer these days, right? So a quote from Mary Magdalene that I love is, "My ministry has to do with awakening women to both their healing journey and their empowerment." So I just feel so aligned with her in so many ways. She also talks about our body and our emotions as a feedback loop, which is exactly what I talk about with my clients. She understood the neuroscience. She understood it from a higher perspective, from a light body perspective. She understood that our body and our emotions were signals to us. They were indicators of where we were in alignment with our highest selves, when we were out of alignment, and how to hold those emotions, that energy in motion, how to hold it in love and compassion. And I think this is the part about coming from the heart. Love and compassion and acceptance and understanding and forgiveness of ourselves first, and then others, so we can heal and transmute, these heavy, dense energies, and move into this space where we can then totally surrender to source, to our higher selves, to our heart, higher guidance, to everything that we have available to us as divine sovereign beings. So let me just see if there's anything else. I told you about the meditation. I told you about a little bit about how the business brand came through. So I guess what I would most like to sit down and talk to Mary Magdalene, I want to talk to her about everything, but in this day and age, is how to continue to step into divine feminine Christed leadership when we, without fear, or how do we manage the fear of rejection, the fear of judgment, the fear of criticism, the fear of being called out. And I spoke to this a little bit yesterday in my Campfire story, or the day before, around these kinds of judgments or betrayals, not only by other women, but, in my experience, I've had very vivid, visceral memories of past life experiences of having been banished from my community, having been stoned almost to the point of death, and then sent away from my children, my community, my work, my everything. I've had experience of being held in underground prisons, raped, tortured, spat on, defecated on, starved, and I'm not saying this to try to, do like porn, trauma, whatever, but this is just what has come into my awareness over the years that I have dedicated myself to this path. And with the assistance of a beautiful friend, Alondra Anderson, who I did some somato-emotional experiencing work with one time when I was on her table, and I had been having these images of being imprisoned in this underground cell with all the things, and these men kept asking me for something, and I didn't even know what. I said, I have nothing left to give you. But what I understood sort of symbolically now is that it was always the power of the feminine to create, and her direct connection with source, that was so threatening to the patriarchy and to the powers that be. And many years ago, when I was starting my business, I had all this fear come up about, right, being called out. Who do you think you are? Charlatan. You're just in it for the money. You don't really know what you're doing. And of course, I was early enough in my process that some of that felt true to me. So what was I going to say about that? Oh, I just lost my train of thought. So that thread has, oh, I know. So I went into meditation around that a lot. And one of the questions I asked was, why am I holding back, right? What am I still afraid of? And what came through was that I was holding back because of all my past experiences, and especially this one where I was in this underground cell. And I'll tell you the full story of that in a moment. But I was terrified that if I invited women to follow me, right, to take the path that I was taking, which at that time meant leaving my 30-year marriage, leaving my job, leaving my home and my children. I took a huge leap 15 years ago. But that if women followed me they would suffer as a result, whatever that meant for them. And I didn't really understand what that meant until I had this healing with Alondra, and I was on the table in her living room in West Hartford before she moved up to New York. And she was working on me, and all of a sudden I felt something like click with my heart. And just as I felt that, she said to me, Yeshua just inserted a key and turned it in your heart. And in that moment, I saw in my mind's eye, and this was, still pretty new to me, because as I said, that's not my primary way of getting information. But this I saw as clear as day, that there was a long underground hallway, and there were cells all along that hall as far as I could see. And when that key was turned, all of the doors started opening, and hundreds, thousands, I don't know how many women poured out of those cells down this underground passageway, and then up sort of steps built into a grassy knoll out into this beautiful clearing. And then I was the final one to come out. And that was what I had been holding back around, that I was afraid if women followed me, that they would also be imprisoned, tortured, banished, abandoned, betrayed, starved, right? All of the things that happened in reality to women during certain times in our past lives, when women were being tortured and killed and made example of, so that other women wouldn't follow them. So I'm not sure what else I have to say about all of that. There's so much, but I don't want to just ramble. That's probably enough for one campfire story. I hope that there was something in this story that touched you, touched your heart, felt relevant, perhaps brought something up for your own healing, helped you feel more empowered, maybe made your path feel a little bit lighter, your feet a little lighter as you walk along your own path of awakening, and your own path of healing and awakening and trusting yourself as the beautiful, Christed, feminine leader that you came here to be in these times. So that's the end of my campfire story tonight. I hope you all, it's not time for bed yet, but we're pretending we're at the campfire. So I hope you have a beautiful rest of your evening around the campfire, and a great night's sleep. And I look forward to telling another story tomorrow. And if you're guided today, again, it is the feast day of Mary Magdalene, beautiful, divine, Christed, feminine leader who came to this planet really as a way shower for those of us who were going to come after, who really wants you to know that your higher self is the safest teacher, the safest mentor for you. So the more we can keep coming back to self, trusting our own tuition, being our own mentors, allowing our higher self to be our mentor and our guide, breaking through this social conditioning, these patriarchal rules and strangleholds that we have all been living under, and understanding that your own self-mastery of your awareness, of your surrendering to your higher self, is what's going to allow you to live an extraordinary life. And that, my loves, is what I hold in prayer and in my heart for you. Good night.